Welcome back to the Moxi Skates YouTube channel. My name is Carly, or Roller Ghoulie, and today we are talking about fear. This is a really well-timed video request. We got some requests in the comments to do a video about fear, and this is just coincidental timing because I've had anxiety all week about filming something at the end of this week or in 2 days, and I'm definitely fearful of it, so this is a great topic for me to talk about today. Fear. What is it? It's a feeling. Hard to explain. It comes in all different forms. Everyone experiences it differently for different reasons. To me, I think 3 types of fear that comes along with skating is the fear of embarrassment, the fear of failure, and the fear of injury or getting hurt. That's an obvious one and probably the one that we fear the most. To break some of those down, fear of embarrassment to me is just being around other people in a space where certain genders are not necessarily the highest percentage, or in a space where you have a lot of eyes on you. Some skate parks you go to and there's literally a crowd circling watching you as you skate, like Venice Beach. Or some skate parks by me get really crowded, especially in the winter. There's only a couple indoor skate parks here, so they usually get pretty crowded, and me being a female on roller skates is not super common here, and I feel this kind of overwhelming feeling of fear sometimes that I'm being judged by others, or I have too many eyes on me, and I get really in my head and insecure about my skating, and it sucks. I think the embarrassment kind of, maybe that's not the best word, but it's almost like a self-conscious feeling that comes over you, and you fear the worst. You fear that people are thinking negative things about you. You fear that your skating is embarrassing if you're still learning, or sometimes for me, I don't want to try something new if it's really busy at the park that day, or there's a certain vibe that I'm just like not feeling. It's really scary to start trying something new and falling in front of people and maybe kind of looking silly for a while you're learning, or like learning a new trick. And I know saying it out loud seems really silly, but it's actually super common and something that everybody or a lot of people feel, but we just don't talk about it that much. I personally tend to be pretty insecure, especially with my skating. I get really nervous. Every time I roll up to a park, I'm nervous. I get like butterflies. I feel like it takes me a while to warm up to the situation, to the people, to the park, especially if I'm traveling, I'm going to parks that I'm unfamiliar with. It's definitely a bit nerve-wracking sometimes, and you know, we fall, we make mistakes. I'm still learning all the time. I'm still trying to break down different tricks or get the feel for a new bowl that I'm skating, and sometimes you feel like a little embarrassed that you're not, doing your best or putting out, the best performance of your life that day. And it really shouldn't be about anyone else but ourselves. But unfortunately, the reality of skating and learning and being a beginner, or even being an advanced skater who's still learning tricks, it could definitely feel embarrassing or like overwhelming to put yourself out there. So one, give yourself credit that you're on skates at all and that you're willing to put yourself out there, because I think that is a big step and something that we should all be proud of that we do, and that we lace up our skates and we go out in the world and we do this thing because it's worth it. This next one, I didn't quite kind of put my finger on it at first. I was trying to think of the types of fear I experience when I'm skating, and this one came to me all of a sudden and I was like, duh, but fear of failure. And I didn't really think about it because in my mind I'm not really ever thinking about failure and that I'm afraid of that, but really I am. And it's not necessarily that I fear that I'm going to fail, because we fail all the time, and by fail I mean we fall, we don't land the trick. Sometimes it will take me all day to try to land something and I never land it. So I guess the fear that I'm referring to is the consequences of failing or not getting the trick. And that is it builds a fear of coming back to it and trying again. It builds a fear of falling in front of others, not succeeding in front of others, letting yourself down. I know that sometimes I will go to a spot or a skate park and I have a certain trick in my mind or a vision of what I want to do, and when I get there I kind of freeze up and I'm scared and I feel like I let myself down a lot because I have these expectations for myself, and when I can't live up to those expectations that I've set for myself, I feel like I've failed and that I've let myself down, and that feeling really, really sucks. So I think I fear that feeling that comes with failing. The other thing is it's really not a good feeling when you spend hours trying to do something or hours at a spot trying to get a clip and you never get it. That's not what we ever want to happen, but it definitely does. And I think that sometimes discourages us from getting back out there and trying again. And I think this one is more prevalent in my life than I realized. So it's good for me to kind of break it down and talk about those experiences. And finally, the last level of fear that I think we experience often as skaters is injury or getting hurt. Nobody wants this to happen. Unfortunately, it does happen sometimes. I myself have had a pretty high number of injuries so far in my 8 years of skating. And yeah, I'm not gonna lie, before I got injured, I was pretty fearful on skates, but it was a different kind of fear. And now that I've had these injuries, sometimes serious ones, sometimes not as serious, it definitely instills a mindset that injury is very real and very possible. And I don't want to scare anyone away from skating and progressing and building your skills, because I also know skaters have been skating for 20 plus years and they've never gotten an injury in their life. So everyone's different. Sometimes I feel like I'm just a tad unlucky, but I feel like, you know, the injury does humble you. It makes you realize that we're not invincible and that sometimes there are consequences to the things we do, like extreme sports. But yes, with injury comes a very real fear of getting injured again, or getting your first injury, or having to go through the whole process of when you do get injured. Because I know what's possible, I tend to dream up the worst case scenarios, especially if I'm trying to do something that's scary. Instead of visualizing myself doing the trick and visualizing all the great possibilities, I visualize the worst case scenarios. And sometimes they're pretty ridiculous and I need to say them out loud for someone to talk me off the ledge, literally sometimes. So yeah, it's injury is a tricky thing, and getting hurt is a tricky thing. Sometimes even just falling on our knees or falling on our butt really hard or scraping up our skin is enough to kind of make you fearful of a certain trick or a certain obstacle. And I think that is the most tangible fear that we can kind of express to one another and that we universally feel. So it's the easiest one to kind of pinpoint, and probably what holds us back the most from reaching our greatest potential. So if skating comes with all this fear, why do we do it? There are many reasons, but for me, it's that feeling of achieving something that you didn't think was achievable, or something that was holding you back and you broke through that. So to kind of put it in perspective, when I'm filming for a video, I'm going to these street spots and I'm having to visualize the trick I want to do, and then I actually have to try the trick, and sometimes you do it over and over and over and over and over again. And sometimes you fall a lot, sometimes you get hurt, and sometimes you don't land it and you have to come back. And the feeling of when you finally land that trick, or you have this immense amount of fear that you have to literally tell it to be quiet and you just full send, the feeling of accomplishing that is so worth it. It's one of the best feelings in the world to me. And I think that's why I keep pushing through the boundaries of my personal fear. I've always been a big believer, and I've probably said this a lot to a lot of people, but I feel like we're capable of so much more than we actually do. So our bodies can handle a lot more than we think, or our bodies can jump higher or grind longer or flip I don't know, bigger. Our bodies are capable of so much, but it's the fear that holds us back the most. And that is something that I struggle with a lot, is that when I have a lot of fear about doing something, I know that my body is physically capable of doing it, but my mind is just not there. And there is a lot of techniques that you can kind of do to push through that. The first one is visualize. And this was taught to me a long time ago, actually, when I was in massage therapy school, that your brain scientifically doesn't know the difference between when you visualize yourself doing something versus when you physically do it. So if you visualize yourself doing something, your brain thinks, okay, I've done this. And it will actually help build the courage and the mental capacity to actually physically do the thing that you're visualizing. So I always tell people to visualize what you're doing or what you want to do, and visualize the best case scenario, you doing it exactly the way you want to do it, and the perfect landing. And if you visualize that enough, I think it does help kind of break the walls of fear down a little bit. I'm not saying that it just magically gets rid of it, because that's not what happens, but I do think that it helps, and I think it's extremely important, because when I'm visualizing the worst case scenarios, all I'm doing is creating more anxiety for myself, and I'm not doing myself any favors whatsoever. So, even if there isn't, enough evidence to prove that if you visualize, you can absolutely do it, I don't think that it hurts to visualize a good outcome for yourself before you actually physically go and do the trick. As far as the embarrassment goes, I tend to kind of block everybody out. I've been told before that I seem very unapproachable when I'm at the skate park or at a skate session, and it's not because I mean to kind of come off that way, but for myself, I really have to kind of like block everybody out and just focus on me and skating. I tell myself often when I'm skating that it's just you and your skates, it's just you here, or if I'm with some friends, I'll be like, it's just you and so-and-so. And I kind of have to repeat those things to myself so that I don't get too conscious of the other people around me and what they could possibly be thinking about me, or that people are paying attention to me. I just really don't like that feeling. So it helps for me to try to tune everyone out. Some people like to throw in headphones and listen to their favorite music. Some people don't do well listening to music in their headphones, so they'll just kind of talk to themselves in their heads. I also find that going to sessions with good friends really helps, because it's easier to kind of tune in with you and your friends' energy and the vibe that you're creating as a group, and kind of tune out the rest of the people. But if you have to go skating by yourself, which can definitely be a fearful thing, I recommend going to the part of the skate park or whatever that you feel the most comfortable, and slowly get warmed up, build your confidence with the things that are familiar to you before you start trying out different obstacles and doing things that you might not get right away or have to work on for a bit. And I think that helps me a lot. When I get to skate park, I don't go straight to the stair rail and just start full sending it. I'm going to warm up on the mini ramp or pump around on the bowl for a little bit and kind of get my juices going and start feeling more comfortable about being at the skate park, and that definitely helps. One of the ways that I try to push past the fear of failure is by reminding myself that it's okay. I'm not going to be perfect. Nobody's perfect. The saying, practice makes progress, not perfection, that couldn't be more accurate, because you're never going to be perfect at something. You're never going to get something 100% of the time, no matter what. So it's okay to fail sometimes. It's okay to mess up. And you have to remind yourself that it's okay. You can't get super hard on yourself or have too high of expectations that you can't meet, because you're setting yourself up to be let down. I think the hardest part is the first attempt at something that you're afraid of. And if you can get that first attempt out of the way, it feels so much better. But if you don't ever land the trick that you wanted to in that day, try again the next day or the next month or the next year. There are certain spots that I failed at getting, and I still have it in my mind that I want to go back and try again, and some of those spots were 3 years ago. And I don't beat myself up about it, because I want to come into it with a good mindset. And if I'm not setting these really high expectations and I'm just coming back to it when it feels like I'm ready, then the process is going to be much more organic and feel a lot better. But don't ever beat yourself up about taking too long to get something or having to come back another day. There's nothing wrong with that, and everyone goes through that. Nobody lands something all of the time. Nobody does stuff first try and never has to make a mistake and do it again. So please be nice to yourself and love yourself, and just know that you being out there is already such a feat in itself. And the failing part is just a piece of the process of skating. Another piece of advice I have is not to compare yourself to others. Even though I was just saying that everybody fails sometimes and nobody gets things 100% of the time, I compare myself to others a lot, and it does not do anything good for you. Everyone has a different learning pace. Everyone has a different level of fear. I have learned this more and more over time, but that was actually something that surprised me to learn about skating when I first got into it. Is I just thought that however much you practiced was how good you would be. So I thought if I practiced all the time, I would be really good. And only people that were really good practiced all the time. And if you weren't very good, then you didn't practice enough. That's what was in my mind. And I learned pretty quickly that that's not how it is. Some people are naturally built to be athletic. Some people have a very low threshold of fear. I have a friend, for example, who started skating rails within her first few months of skating like it was no big deal at all. And it took me years to start skating rails, and I was terrified of them for years after that. There are people who only skate a couple times a month and they're amazing skaters, and they don't even have a background in skating. And then you have people who do have a background in other sports, and if they don't practice consistently every day or every other day, then they just aren't keeping up with the skill of the other person who isn't practicing very often at all. So comparing yourself to people just honestly doesn't make sense, because we don't all look the same, we don't all talk the same or dress the same or like the same things. So why would we all skate the same and have the same thoughts about skating and the same feelings about fear? It's just not realistic. So to compare yourself to someone else is like comparing apples to oranges. So before I get into my little personal story, I want to know, what is something that you specifically have done recently or in your skate journey that was a feat against fear? Maybe it was a trick that you were terrified of even attempting, or maybe it was something that you have been attempting and you just haven't landed it and it was scary every time you tried and you finally nailed it. I want to know those things, because those are some of my favorite stories. Is just that time when you got that feeling that I think is the best in the world, of when you nailed it or you attempted it and you're like, I did it even though I was terrified. So please share your story in the comments below. We do read them and we do enjoy hearing what you all have to share. So my personal little story is I've been filming for a street video for almost a year now. Some injuries kind of prolonged the process. But anyway, I've known for a long time what I've wanted to do as my ender. And if you don't know, the ender is usually the best or the scariest clip of your video. So I kind of found this spot early on in me filming for this video, and I knew I wanted to do this, but I just wasn't ready at that specific time when I was there. So I knew I was going to come back to it. I kept setting a date for when I was going to go back and do it, and that date kept getting pushed back and back and back, and I kept having excuses why. I didn't have a filmer for that day, or the weather wasn't cooperating that day, which is valid because I live in the Midwest. But I just kept thinking of a bunch of excuses, and mostly it was because I am fearful of it. So I finally have a deadline for when I have to submit all of my footage, and that deadline is Sunday. So this Sunday, which is in 2 days from now, I have to go to that spot and film my ender. And I don't have to, of course, but I want to, and it's really important to me, and it's something that's been on my mind, and I know that when I land it, it's going to feel amazing. But every time I think about it, and every time I visualize it, I get so much anxiety, and I've been really stressed out about it for days now, and I try not to think about it, but when I do, I get all this anxiety. When I've been talking to my filmers and the other people that are going to be there, and we have to discuss it, I just like well up with this overwhelming amount of anxiety because of the fear. So I'm not excited, but it seems, you know, maybe from an outside perspective or from people who don't share these same experiences, that I sound crazy right now. Why would I put myself in harm's way or put myself to face fear if it's giving me this much anxiety? And the reason for it is that I want to push through that fear. There's obviously something that draws me back in and other people in when you're terrified of something and you just have this overwhelming feeling that you literally have to be like, shut up, and then you just do it. And once you do it, that first attempt, it feels so good to get out of the way, and it's like a weight has been lifted off of you when you finally do it. And sometimes I don't always land it, but just the attempt feels so good that I was able to push past that fear. And I can think of many instances where I had so much fear about doing a trick or skating an obstacle that I wanted to scream or cry. I just like didn't know what to do with my feelings. And I usually will make the attempt, and that's the hardest part. But once you make the attempt, you're just like, it feels so good. And I know that even with all this anxiety and the weight that I've been carrying around the past few days about doing this, I know is going to be instantly shed from me the moment that I actually make the attempt. Fingers crossed that I land at first try and I don't have to do it again, because it actually is a really scary spot and trick that I'm doing. So I don't want to have to do it again. But anyway, yeah, I'm doing my processes. I'm visualizing all the best case scenarios. I'm visualizing doing it first try. I'm visualizing that feeling of joy of when I actually make the attempt. So I'm hoping that this will kind of help me when I get there, that I'm going to be okay and kind of let the fear subside and quiet it down so that I can make the attempt. And I share that story with you, not just to talk about myself and about this video, but to kind of put it into perspective of what the fear is like for me personally, because maybe you have the exact same feelings, or maybe you don't, and it's important for you to hear how others have their skating experience. But there are definitely times that I'm so afraid that I tell myself, is this worth it? Like, is it worth carrying around this weight? Is it worth feeling this, swell of emotions that I don't know what to do with it? Most of the time, I feel like the answer is yes. And I feel pretty happy when I get it out of the way and I defeat that fear. Sometimes the answer is no. And usually it's because I talk myself out of doing something, because that feeling is very real, and the negative consequences that sometimes come with making those scary attempts are very real. Sometimes injuries do happen. So it is easier to kind of go one side than the other. It's easier to be like, you know what, yeah, this is a bad idea, or I really don't want to do this, or I don't want to experience these feelings anymore, so I'm just going to stop. That's usually the easier way to go. And, listen to yourself, listen to your body. If you feel like this is really something that you're not ready for, or something that could possibly have a very negative consequence to, and you're just not ready for that, then please listen to yourself. And yeah, maybe you need to take some time and come back to it at another date, or you need to, practice more and work up to it. And that's totally okay. You don't always have to push through fear. There is going the other route, and that is acceptable. Now, I also feel like, since it is easier to go that way, because it's easier to be like, yeah, I'm scared, so no, I'm not going to do this. Also keep in mind that there are a lot of times that you're going to have those feelings when you are very capable of doing the thing that you're afraid of. And it's easier to say, no, I'm not going to do this, but it's sometimes worth it to say, yes, I'm going to do this. So even though you might be terrified and you might not want to carry those feelings, you just want to get rid of them, I feel like once you kind of push through that fear and you defeat it, that feeling that you're going to experience is gonna kind of open your eyes to what I'm talking about, and you're gonna understand why sometimes it is really important to experience fear and to push through it. You know, it kind of like reminds us that we're alive and that skating is hard. You know, you don't just come into this and everything's easy, because if it was, then it wouldn't really feel like there is a purpose for, you know, trying to do harder and harder tricks or skate more difficult obstacles. Like, there's a reason why we want to do it, and it's because they're more advanced. It's scarier. If it wasn't scary, then everyone would be at the same level. We'd all be, you know, like the Jaws of skateboarding. We would all be at that level, jumping down like 3 stories. But we're not all doing that, which is okay. But it just is kind of an example of why we work towards building ourselves, and fear is going to come along with that. You're not going to progress and never experience fear. So sometimes, yeah, take the high road and say no that day and maybe come back to another time if it's just not feeling right. But times when you can tell yourself, you know what, my body is physically capable of doing this, but mentally I'm just having a really hard time because I'm scared. I feel like those are the times that you need to tell yourself, get rid of that and just do it. Slowly over time, you kind of will build what your threshold is of what your capabilities really are. And when the fear is just kind of an irrational, I don't want to say irrational, because fear is there for a reason. It's your body and your mind telling you something for a reason. But there are times that it's just all in your mind, and you're gonna learn when those times are appropriate to push through and when the times are appropriate to pass on it and come back to another time, or not at all. So I definitely think it comes with experience. If you're a brand new skater and you're experiencing a lot of fear, please know that we all went through it, and it's okay to fall. It's okay to be afraid, and it will get better, I promise. I also like to talk to my friends that I've been skating with for a long time, or often, what they think. So I do have a friend, and I ask him all the time when I get to an obstacle that I'm really afraid of. I'll ask him, is this something that I can do, or am I being delusional in even considering this? And he's always honest with me and will tell me 100% you can do that. Or he'll be like, I think you can do that, but maybe you need to work up to it. Or he'll be like, and I really appreciate having friends like that, because sometimes it's hard to kind of differentiate between when you are experiencing fear that's just in your mind that you need to quiet down, or when you're experiencing fear because it's totally appropriate and you shouldn't be doing what you're doing. So having friends that you skate with often enough to kind of read your skating abilities, and they get to know you and your skating, it's really important to have those people in your life, because you can talk to them and you can ask them for their opinions, and sometimes they're very valuable. But other than that, there's really no secret answer to how to defeat fear. It's something that we all just kind of experience differently and conquer differently. Those are kind of my 3 types of fear that I go through, and things that I tend to work on that help. If you have something that you think helps you that I didn't say, or something that you really want to share with the community, put it in the comments. You know, your advice could end up helping someone out a lot. So yeah, fear is a really tricky thing, and it shows itself with many different faces. So there's no one thing that just makes it go away. It's what makes us human. It's what makes us, you know, invincible. We're not invincible, and fear is your body's and your mind's way of reminding you of that. So it's a beautiful, I would say it's a bittersweet and beautiful thing that we experience. I think it's important, and it's a good thing that it's there, and it helps us kind of figure out how far we can push ourselves. And I would say it's my favorite and my least favorite thing about skating. I love that feeling that you get when you defeat it and you conquer it, but I hate the way it feels when it's overwhelming. And I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that, but it's all a part of skating, and I'm grateful that it's there. I know this video is a lot of me just kind of talking out my experiences and feelings, but I hope for those of you who have been dealing with a lot of fear and were looking for some advice or someone to just share the experience with you, I hope this video helped. If you have anything that you want us to talk about next time, or something that's been on your mind, tutorials or just skate talks or advice, whatever, please let us know. We want to do things that will help the community and help you with your skate journey. So yeah, thank you for watching this, and thank you for being with me while I ramble. I am Roller Ghoulie. Keep an eye out for my video that's coming out at the end of April. And you'll kind of see what I'm talking about with all the fear that I had to deal with. Thank you so much. I hope you all have a lovely day.